everybody, Adam here, and this one's a little different. So this one is straight to video. This is not a stream, and I will go ahead and lead by saying this is not sponsored content. I'm making this as kind of a courtesy to my friends who are the devs over at Rout TCG, and as a tool to be used by other players because I think the game is rad, and I want more people to kind of see what it's about. So, today what we're going to be talking about here is deck building in Rout TCG. So, we'll start with a couple of the high-level things. In Rout, a deck must be at least 50 cards. It can be greater than 50 cards, but it must be at least 50 cards. You can also have no more than 3 of any one card, no more than 2 of that card if it is fabled. So Fabled, for those of you coming from Magic, Fabled is functionally like the mythic rare of Rout TCG, and that imposes a further restriction in Rout, where not only is the card Fabled, mythic, harder to obtain, but you can only put up to 2 in any one deck. So, at least 50 cards. No more than 3 of any one card, unless, of course, the card says otherwise. Magic players, you're familiar with this. Sometimes the card itself will break the traditional rules. That's okay. So, how do I deck build in Rout? Well, I guess before we go into that, when you start playing Rout, there are these pre-made decks here on the table. Feel free to take a look at those, because even if we're not playing that, it can give you some different thoughts about the way that things interact, the way that things kind of work together, and how you might be able to start working on some deck ideas of your own. For this video, I'm going to just delete those. Now, if you are deck building if you are newer to Rout TCG and you are deck building for the first time, or you're not super familiar with the game yet, I recommend using these piles of cards laid out on the tables. The reason that is because this is every card in the game. And this is a stack of 3, a full set of that card for every one card, except, of course, the fabled cards. Those are 2s. But what this does is it's a little easier for you to kind of look at something. So, for example, in Tabletop Simulator, if you put your cursor over a card and hold Alt, you can see that card up close. So this kind of lets you look at things a little better and start to kind of process all of this information, and start to take in kind of all of the different things that exist and what you might be able to do. So, again, in this video, I'm not going to use these, but if you are new to deck building in Rout, I absolutely suggest that you do utilize these piles. Given that I am pretty comfortable deck building with the game at this point, I'm going to delete these because the chaos drives me insane, and it just doesn't really make my brain work very well. So I'm just going to delete all these. The one stack I am going to save is this stack here. This is one of each base. In Rout TCG, the base exists outside of your 50 cards. You can pick whatever base you want. However, different bases do different things. So when you choose a base, you want to think about, and this is really the very first fundamental of deck building, not just in Rout, but in any game. What do I want this deck to do? What is the plan? So you start thinking about, okay, what am I trying to do here? So obviously, keep access to the bases. You may want 1 or more of these. We'll get into why more might be an option later. So, for example, let's go here. I'm going to use these stacks of cards over here on the sides. These stacks are much like the previous piles that were laid on the table. This is every card in the game. However, this is organized and searchable. Given that I know what I'm looking for, this works better for me. Again, I do strongly advise that if you are building for the first handful of times, instead use the piles and tables. It's going to be so much easier to look over everything. So, what are we doing here? Okay. I think I'm going to... It is Nature's Call. Okay. I think that since this is not something I have done personally previously, I'm going to build a Nature's Call deck. So, the first game plan is I want to build something playing Nature's Call. So Nature's Call is, and I apologize, I'm going to use some Magic the Gathering terminology here because I know that many of the people watching my channel are from Magic, coming from Magic. I will use proper game terms as well, but I'm also going to use some Magic terminology for equivalency for those of you who are coming to the game from Magic. So Nature's Call is a spell, or the equivalent of a sorcery, for 7 nature points. This is like 7 green mana in Magic. The spell says, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. Put all nature units revealed this way into play. Put all others revealed into the discard. So, I want to build a Nature's Call deck. Nature's Call says to me, I want units. I want them to be nature units, specifically. Okay, cool, great. Easy enough. So, we're primarily going to function out of this stack here. This is the stack of nature cards. Secondly, what I have to think about here is if I'm playing a Nature's Call for 7, do I want, on average, right, coming at this from a competitive standpoint, this is the way my brain works. If you are building something more casual, some of these principles may not apply. Please feel free to take the pieces that you find useful and ignore the rest. But I want to, when I cast Nature's Call, I want to get at least 7 nature skill worth of value out of whatever I flip over. Now, again, randomness happens. Sometimes you're going to get a bad call. But I want, on average, my Nature's Call to give me at least 7 nature worth of value in 3 cards. I want at least 3 units. I want to, on average, hit units that equal 7 nature skill. If more, great. If a little less, fine. But I want to try to average that out. I want to spend less on those units if I can. So what are some things that I'm interested in? Well, there are a few ways we can go with this. And I think that my game plan here is going to be, we want to do something kind of mid-rangey. So I want just generically good stat-lined units or creatures. So I think one of them I'm going to start with is Dryad Sapling. So Dryad Sapling here, we're going to drag this onto the table. Dryad Sapling is a 1-cost 1/1. If you have 4 or more points in nature, its base attack and health become 3. If you have 7 or more points in nature, its base health and attack become 5. So this is something that you can play for cheap early and scales and gets better as the game goes on. So I think we're going to play some Dryad Saplings because that is a card that in the late game, if we hit it off a Nature's Call, will be very good. But we can also play in the early game to kind of stop some early aggression or get in a few points of early damage. Another thing I think I want here is copies of Rooted Ent. So Rooted Ent, a 3-cost 2/4, it grants 1 additional point in nature while it is in play. This is going to make it easier to get to Nature's Call quickly, so I think that that is going to be a resource that we want access to. Also, 3-cost 2/4, pretty decent stat line. We're not upset about that. So we're going to get those in here. Let's see. Forest Wolf. And this is probably a thing we look at, but we'll come back to it. I am interested in Young Ent. Young Ent is a... drag it out here so people can actually see it. Young Ent, a 4-cost with 6 health with Foundation. Its attack is equal to its current health. So, as this takes damage, it gets worse, but 4 costs 6/6, pretty good. If it scales down a little bit, that's probably fine. So we're going to play 3 Young Ents. My apologies. If anyone is not coming from Magic, I apologize. My brain is going to default to 4 copies because that's the default in Magic. I will try to correct myself if I do get there, but yes, 3 copies. I also want... yes, Commune. So Commune is a 2-cost spell, or sorcery, permanently gain a point in nature. Easy enough. This is ramp. This is going to make it easier to cast our more expensive units and spells quickly. We probably want to try to get Nature's Call online as quickly as possible. So, as such, keep that in mind. Rooted Entling. It's another one. This is one of the early drops again. That's pretty good. 1 cost, 2 health, foundation. So this is a 1 cost 2/2. That's great. The stat line is good. It's going to stop some early aggression, and is a reasonably respectable thing to hit off a Nature's Call. Like, we're not as happy as we were if we hit Dryad, but like, it's probably fine. So we'll take a look through some more stuff here. So there are a few different ways we could go with this. We could try to slant it a little more aggressively and play things like this Mamba Hatchling, which is a 1 cost 3/1. That's fine. I think that gets outclassed in the later game pretty quick, and I think that realistically we're trying to be a little more mid-range. We want our units on average to be a little higher value than that. Battle Tortoise, pretty okay. This is a 6 cost 1/8 with Hit Me, which means that when your opponent attacks, they must attack Battle Tortoise if they're going to declare attacks, until Battle Tortoise is dead, or stunned, or what have you. So that's a pretty reasonable option. We can look at something with Battle Tortoise. Huge Turtle. This is the easy one. This is a 4 cost 1/6 with Hit Me. This is a pretty decent road bump. It's going to make sure that we have some time to kind of set up. Sickly Gorilla. Actually, more importantly, we'll start with Sickly Rhino. Sickly Rhino is a 2 cost 4/3. When it comes into play, it is poisoned, which means that on the first turn, it gets a single poison counter, and at the beginning of every upkeep, the beginning of every turn thereafter, it gains a poison counter. When it gains its 4th poison counter, it dies. That's okay. 2 cost for a 4/3, solid. We're into that life. So we will take 3 copies of Sickly Rhino. Furthermore, I will be playing Sickly Gorilla. This is the kind of slightly larger version of that Sickly Rhino. This is a 4 cost 6/3 that is poisoned when it enters play. We will play 3 of those as well. So, again, I think we're going to play Ender here. This is a 6 cost 8 health with unit with Foundation. So this is a 6 cost 8/8. Again, pretty solid. On average, if you are getting more stat than you are skill points, you're probably doing okay. Bonus points if it has extra effects or abilities. Adult Rhino's like fine. Rhino Elder. This is one that's pretty reasonable. It is not that hard for a deck like us to get to 7, and a 10/10 is big. Big, 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 big. So I don't hate doing Rhino Elder. So I think we're going to play 3 Rhino Elder. We might cut a Rhino Elder later if we need some space. It's not the highest thing on my priority list, but it exists. I think we'll play Mantith Rolepile. This is a 3 cost 5/5. Again, Foundation, it gets +2 health if you control 2 other Mantis. We don't particularly care about that. It is just a 3 cost 5/5. So we want decent stat lines. All units cannot be targeted by attacks or effects this turn. That's not crazy. That's actually a pretty reasonable effect for a deck like this. This is a young Rhino. This is a 4 cost 5/5. That's a pretty reasonable stat line. I will definitely take this Unkillable Demon Ent. This is a 5 cost 6/6 with Regeneration 2. It heals 2 damage at the end of each turn. I will indeed play 3 Unkillable Demon Ent. Do we like Rhino? We kind of like Rhino. We don't love Rhino. I think we need more kind of mid-game filler. I'll play 3 young Rhino. I could be convinced that this is wrong. Some other things, we could start looking into some other Mantoth synergies. This is kind of the tribal thing in nature, that they all get, a lot of them care about each other. So we could start looking at playing some Mantoth synergies. That would be a totally reasonable way to take a deck like this. 5 costs 7, 1 with Poisonous. Don't think we're trying to live that life. I just don't think Adult Rhino's good enough. It's a 6 cost 7/7, but it has nothing else going on. Alright. Let's see here. Mantoth stuff. Can give all our units regeneration, but our units are spread enough that I don't think that's good. I can play Sickly Wasp here. So Sickly Wasp, the last of the Sickly creatures. It is a 1 cost 2/2 with Airborne. This is flying for Magic players. And it is poison when it comes into play. Again, we get 3 turns of it, and then it goes away forever. The wolf package is probably not good. Alright. Wolf Tamer finds Forest Wolf. Lavaborn is a very strange one. Could look at some Battle Tortoises, but I think we can maybe we can do better than Battle Tortoise. Mantoth Soldier is another Mantoth that's probably good enough to play on its own. It's a 2 cost 3/3. It gets +2/+2 if you control these 2 other Mantoths. Yeah, I can see playing. We can play Soldier. And this is where, like, we can have packages for things, just small selections. We don't necessarily need to be all in on, like, some of the tribal stuff and things like that. I don't know that we're Mantoth Queen deep. Naiad Cleanser. 5 mana, 2/6. Remove status effects from unit end of turn. River Naiad. That's not crazy. Okay. And so this is where I'm going to stop for a second. We currently have 3 more slots left in our deck, and there's a couple of core questions I think I want to ask and answer before we finish. So, question 1. What base do we think we're looking at? So with a deck like this, there's a few different options. We can kind of look at some different variations on what this looks like. So step 1, I think the kind of easy is this Precarious Promenade. So Promenade says that when you start the game and you gain your first skill point, you get an additional skill point of that type. So as a byproduct, you start with the lowest health of any base, 18 health. But instead of getting 1 skill point or 1 mana on turn 1, you get 2. This can be huge, given that we're trying to kind of really accelerate into the mid to late game with communes and things like that in the early stages. I think that is absolutely the kind of thing we might want to do. Just the ability to kind of start snowballing early seems pretty okay. Another option here, the old standby Brick Bivouac. Given that we're a deck that's trying to go a little later, another approach we could take here is, are we trying to race towards the end game, or are we trying to survive towards the end game and have a kind of dominating board presence? Like, you're going to have a very hard time dealing with me because I've got all of this stuff and it's all so good. But we need a few extra health points in the early game to kind of get us there. Definitely a possibility. So Brick Bivouac, totally an option. Something like Bloody Tower. It's possible that we're not using all of our skill points every turn, and with extra copies of Commune, we may find ourselves with a Commune in hand and 7 skill points already locked up. So throwing away some bonus skill points, totally a possibility. I think that what I'm going to do here is opt to play Precarious Promenade, and then look at potentially including Brick Bivouac and Bloody Tower in my sideboard, or side deck. That, in this game, is 10 cards. You can include extra bases in your sideboard. I suggest it. Many decks are going to want to look at alternative options for other matchups. Definitely suggest looking at that. So, the next question I want to ask is, right now, what does... And this is something that I think most Magic players are familiar with. What is my mana curve like? So I have... These cost 2. This cost 1. I want to see where my costs fall on average. So 4... Right? Yeah. 5... This is 3... This is 7. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this all down and see kind of what it looks like. Where do we have the biggest density of costs? What is the average cost of a card in our deck? There's more 4s. This is about what I kind of expected I would see. This is Commune at 2. And this is something that's very important to think about when you're playing a deck with a base like Precarious Promenade. And the reason that is because Promenade 2 is an important number here. Because in your deck, you are almost 100% to be 2, 2, 2, or sorry, turn 1, 2, turn 2, 2, turn 3, 3, instead of the traditional 1, 2, 3. And with Commune, that math gets changed even more. So with Commune, that math can go 2, 3, 4. So you'll never hit 1. So we want our 1-drops to be pretty impactful, and a lot of times we're going to be looking at more 2-drops and higher, because some of our 2-drops are going to push us even further along. So finally, we have a couple of 7s. So what does this look like in total? So we have, actually, where is D20s? Okay. This is just a way that I can mark this so that all of you can see it. But if this helps you, absolutely I would recommend doing something like this. So we have 9 cards in our deck currently that cost 1. We have 9 cards in our deck that cost 2. We have 6 cards in our deck that cost 3. This I kind of anticipated. I think that 3 is going to be kind of a weird number for us. We have 12 that cost 4. 3 at 5. 3 at 6. And 5 at 7. Importantly, you can only go up to 7 skill points in any one skill. So this is the maximum that any card in the game will cost right now, is 7. Because as of current, everything is only one skill type. So only 7 nature can ever be generated, so nothing can cost more than 7 nature. So 9, 9, 6, 12, 3, 3, 5. And this sounds about right to me. So in my mind, we're looking to kind of do a couple of these things in the late turns, and not just like one. We want to kind of develop this board presence that says, you know, I'm in control of this. My units are better. My stat lines are better. My card quality is better. And that's kind of one of the key hallmarks of a mid-range deck, is my card quality is better. So, where do we want to be here? I could see trying to find another 3-drop. So we can start taking a look here. Mantith Hydra, not insane. This card is actually quite good. I would say that if we were going to play Mantith Hydra, it is worth trying to evaluate the possibility of playing the Mantith Patrols that it goes and finds, which is totally an option. I don't know that I want to go that deep on a Mantith package. Hidden in the Leaves, this is actually a really cool spell. So this is a reaction or an instant that says all units cannot be targeted by attacks or effects until the end of this turn. This means you can't kill my stuff. Sorry. Try again. So that's pretty great. Again, I don't think we're going to go deep on Mantis, so I don't think something like Giga Mantith is where we want to be. Mantimancer, also probably not the life. Okay, Root Shield, Mantarachnid. Annoying Parrot, not crazy actually. So, Annoying Parrot, 3 cost, 4/1, with Airborne, flying. This is a 3-mana 4/1 flyer. Totally reasonable. This is something that I could absolutely see us playing. In one of the big reasons that a card like this is valuable is because one of the best units in the game right now is a 1-cost X2, where X is equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard or discard pile. So, having something that can just step in front of that and say, this is done. Pretty great. Sacred Axolotl, not really what we're looking to do. I mean, like, the difference between 1 extra power versus Airborne, I think that Parrot is better. Call of the Pack, if we were heavier on a specific type of unit, which, like, we're not crazy off. Like, we've got a lot of Ents. Why is this not an Ent? This should be an Ent, right? I'm not crazy? This should be an Ent. Anyway. So it's totally possible that, like, playing something like Call of the Pack, that is like a kind of tribal-based pump spell, could be reasonable, naming Ent. We have a pretty decent density of Ents, but not really what I think I want to do. Again, I want all of my cards, the raw quality of them, to be kind of solid, and I just don't think that that's something that we're going to get offered. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, like, we could play something like Baby Turtle, just another small, like, road bump for the early game at 2. I don't hate doing that at all. In fact, I think I like that better than Parrot, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I think I'm going to make my last 3 slots Baby Turtle. And so, that means, with these 3, we get a 12, and that is our 50. 9, 12, 6, 12, 3, 3, 5. So this is 15, 20, and 24 is 44, and 6 is 50. Perfect. So this is the start to our deck. So, we have built our Nature's Call deck. I have decided I am playing Precarious Promenade. Then we can think about cards that we want access to in our sideboard. So in games 2 and 3 of a match, you are able to bring in other cards. You are able to change out cards in your deck based on whatever your opponent is doing. And I think that it's very important to think about what situations this. It's probably fine. So, what situations do you think that are going to be troublesome, and how do you want to deal with those situations? So, for example, in my mind, again, one of the best units in the game right now is Hatchling Wyvern Hatchling. That is that X2, and it becomes a problem very quickly, and it gets airborne if X is 5 or greater. So again, having something like Annoying Parrot, pretty reasonable. Hidden Leaves. One of the biggest problems I could see is an opposing deck being full of removal and larger units. Larger units would be hard, but removal and things like that. So it is possible that something like Hidden Leaves would be very good to stop our dudes from dying. Another thing, Encapsulating Wind. Your unit's health cannot drop below 1 this turn. This is similar to this whole Hidden Leaves thing, where, in fact, I think I like Wind better. We can play 3 Encapsulating Wind, and this is going to say, hey, in the games where we're trying to dominate the board, develop that kind of supremacy over combat, just having a thing that says, you're not killing my stuff this turn, sorry, pretty great. So I like that. I think that I am going to play Bloody Tower. I think that it's often enough that we will end up with extra skill points that we can throw into Tower to make it useful. So I will play Bloody Tower. I think that this is especially going to be good against other aggressive decks. So I think, again, especially on the draw against aggressive decks, when we're not going quite as fast as they are, we can cut Precarious Promenade, bring in Bloody Tower, and kind of stop some other aggression. That with some of our turtles should probably clean that up pretty well. Another one that I like pretty well, actually, Forest. Is that card not there? Fight to survive. Unit you control deals damage equal to its attack to any target. So this is a way that your deck based around units can deal with removal. I'm not particularly fond of it. I think that if you're a units-based deck, a lot of times you can deal with your needs for removal through combat in this game. So I'm going to stick to that. I am also, however, this is something that is kind of becoming one of my specialties. I'm going to play Flesh Farm in my sideboard here. The reason being that there is a deck, an archetype, based around using Flesh Farm to get units out of your graveyard. I think that more often than not, we can do that faster than they can. And so by having Flesh Farm, we can negate their ability to do that as easily, and just by playing our own Flesh Farm. And saying, okay, you're going to reanimate stuff? Great. Gotta do it all at once, or I'm going to do it for you. So I like playing Flesh Farm in unit-heavy or creature-heavy decks. So I'm going to play another Flesh Farm here. And then this is where there's definitely some options. You could start looking at all sorts of different... You can start thinking about all sorts of different problems that you might want to solve. I think that these last 2 slots probably really dependent on what you're playing against pretty frequently, or what kinds of problems you think you might run into. So, for example, if you are playing against decks that happened to have a lot of single target removal, and your game plan is to jam a single threat and kind of try to ride minimal threats at a time. Maybe something like Rebirth would be good. If you're seeing a lot of poison effects, something like Cleanse the Forest could be fine. I think what I'm going to do is put 2 Fight to Survive in my sideboard, because I think it's a reasonable enough card. I think at 4 cost, a lot of times I'm going to have units that can just outright mark my opponents, and I think that that's fine. So, I have created a sideboard here, including 3 Annoying Parrot, that I'm going to board in against decks containing Wyverns. I have 3 Encapsulating Winds that I'm going to board in against decks where I am concerned with my creatures dying to damage. This can include decks using magic spells that deal damage to my units, but also in various other unit-based matchups. I'm going to have this Bloody Tower for their aggressive matchups, Flesh Farm for against the Reanimator deck, and Fight to Survive. This is against decks that are trying to go all in on singular threats, and giving ourselves the ability to just kind of mow those down. So, that's us. So we have made our 50-card deck, our 10-card sideboard, and we have chosen our base. And that's just kind of how I deck build. It is just starting with one point, right? What is that I want to do? In this case, we started with the notion of how do I build a deck around Nature's Call that I like. So we start with your base premise. You figure out, okay, how do I want to achieve the overall plan of that deck? So a deck like this, pretty easy, pretty straightforward. What I would say is if you are looking at decks with higher spell counts, start thinking about a couple of different options. Think to yourself, okay, not only do I have to consider what is it my deck does to win the game, but how do I make sure I get there? We did that with this deck by making sure that we had plenty of things to play up along the chain. We wanted to make sure that our cards were raw, powerful on their own throughout the game. So we said, okay, we're going to play a 1-drop that just perpetually gets better. We're going to play 2-drops that, like, you might play a whole tribal deck for, but we're just going to play because their raw stat lines are good. And then all these things up along the chain to get the most value and the most raw stats and best possible card quality out of our Nature's Calls. So that's the way that this deck solves that problem. How do we get to the mid to late game? We're also using things like Commune to make sure that we push ourselves to that point faster. But in a deck like a magic-based deck, you may say to yourself, how do I get to that point? It's going to be playing removal. You're going to play things like Zap, Magic Eye Poke, things like that. They're going to make sure that you get to the late game by removing all your opponent's stuff. And then in other decks, your answer might be, we're not looking to get to the late game. If you were playing a more aggressive deck, like Zoo, for example, your answer to how do I get to the late game is, if we're there, I'm dead. You want to kill your opponent much more quickly than that. So you will just not worry about getting to the late game. So, I think that's it. Hopefully this is helpful for everyone. This video has gone much longer than I originally anticipated. But hopefully this kind of breaks down the deck building process, what I do to deck build for Rout TCG. All of these resources are available in the Tabletop Simulator mod pack, which you can download for free if you own Tabletop Simulator on Steam or other various platforms. So please, feel free to give this game a look. It has been excellent. I know the Kickstarter is getting ready to launch very, very shortly, and you should see that posted. I'll probably post it on my socials, but stay tuned for that through the routtcg.com website as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.